Your fingers are numb before you even open your eyes. The fire went out hours ago. Somewhere close, something large is moving through frozen brush, and you cannot tell what it is. For roughly 400,000 years, this was not a nightmare. This was Tuesday. This is Neanderthal life, and almost none of you would survive a single week of it. Start with the cold, because the cold never stopped. Neanderthals lived through some of the harshest stretches of the Ice Age, in a Europe and Western Asia that swung between merely cold and brutally cold. Researchers who study their skeletons, people like Eric Trinkaus, have long argued that Neanderthal bodies were built for exactly this. Shorter limbs, a stocky barrel chest, and a wide nasal cavity that some scientists believe helped warm and humidify freezing air before it hit the lungs. You do not have that body. You have a body built for grocery stores and central heating. Here is the number that should genuinely alarm you. A widely cited 2001 study by researchers Mark Sorensen and William Leonard modeled how much energy a Neanderthal body would burn just existing in a cold, high-latitude environment. Their estimate landed around 4,000 calories a day, some days more, just to stay alive and mobile. Not to feast, just to function. That is nearly double what most modern adults eat. And you would have to hunt, carry, or dig up every single one of those calories yourself. With no truck, no supermarket, and no guarantee tomorrow would go any better. So how did they get that many calories? Mostly meat, and mostly big, dangerous meat. Isotope studies of Neanderthal bones, the kind of chemical analysis that reveals what an individual actually ate over years of their life, consistently show a diet dominated by large game, red deer, wild horses, bison, sometimes mammoth, and woolly rhinoceros. This was not a leisurely bow hunt from a safe distance. Neanderthals lacked strong evidence of long-range projectile weapons for most of their existence. The tools in the archaeological record point toward thrusting spears, which means, to eat, you very likely had to get close enough to stab an animal that outweighed you by 1,000 pounds and very much wanted to kill you first. This is where the skeletons start telling an uncomfortable story. In 1995, researchers Thomas Berger and Eric Trinkaus published a study comparing the pattern of injuries found on Neanderthal skeletons to the injury records of a modern occupational group. Their comparison point was professional rodeo athletes, people whose entire job is getting thrown by, kicked by, and trampled by large, panicked animals. The Neanderthal fracture pattern, heavy on the head, neck, and upper body, lined up strikingly well with that comparison. This is the detail that gets me every time. These were not people occasionally hurt by wildlife. Injury on that scale was close to a routine cost of dinner. Now picture an actual hunt. You are barefoot, or close to it, on frozen ground, holding a wooden spear with a stone point hafted to the end. Your target is a horse or a bison that can break your ribs with one kick. There is no ranged option. There is no retreat plan if it goes wrong, because retreating means no food tonight, possibly no food this week. You close the distance. You commit to the thrust at a range where the animal can, and often did, hit back. Even a successful hunt could leave you with a shattered arm, a torn shoulder, a fractured skull. In a world with no surgery, no antibiotics, and no anesthesia beyond gritting your teeth. And yet, remarkably, badly injured Neanderthals did not always die. Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq, first excavated by Ralph Selecki starting in the 1950s, produced one of the most striking examples in the entire fossil record. The skeleton known as Shanidar I belonged to a man who lived into what was, for a Neanderthal, old age. He was blind or nearly blind in one eye. His right arm had been amputated, or withered away above the elbow, likely from injury early in life. His bones show healed fractures and signs of chronic infection. He could not have hunted large game in that condition. He could not have fully fed himself. Researchers studying his remains, including later work by Eric Trinkaus, have argued that his survival for years afterward only makes sense if other people in his group fed him, protected him, and kept him alive long after he stopped being useful in the hunt. That is not brutish. That is care. documented in stone and bone hundreds of centuries before anyone wrote the word. It was not only the interior of Europe that demanded this much from a body. Researcher Clive Finlayson, working for decades at sites in Gibraltar, including Vanguard Cave and Gorham's Cave, has documented evidence that some coastal Neanderthal groups also gathered mussels, other shellfish, and even seal or dolphin remains when they washed ashore. That might sound easier than facing down a bison, and in some ways it was, but cold water foraging along a rocky Ice Age coastline in winter carries its own quiet dangers. Hypothermia, slick rock, a single bad slip with no one nearby to help. Survival here was rarely one dramatic threat. It was a dozen smaller ones, stacked every single day, any one of which could end things. Even the tools tell part of this story. Neanderthal front teeth show heavy, distinctive wear patterns that many researchers interpret as evidence of using the mouth as a kind of third hand, gripping hide or sinew, while both hands worked a stone tool against it. Their toolkit, known to archaeologists as the Mousterian industry, centered on flake stone points and scrapers, carefully shaped but without the more specialized bone and antler tools that show up later in the record. Decent tools, made with real skill, not the crude, clumsy technology of old cartoons. Now, I want to be honest with you here, because the popular version of this story often runs ahead of the evidence. Some claims about Shanidar Cave, particularly the idea that a body, known as Shanidar 4, was deliberately buried with a bouquet of flowers, have become genuinely contested among researchers. Later analysis suggested some of the pollen found in the soil may have been introduced by burrowing rodents or insects long after burial, not placed by mourners. More recent excavation work, led by researchers including Emma Pomeroy and Graham Barker in the 2010s, does support that Neanderthals at Shanidar intentionally buried at least some of their dead. But the specific, poetic flower burial detail that gets repeated in almost every documentary about Neanderthals is thinner than the popular version suggests. Real archaeology is messier than a good story, and a responsible telling has to say so. Cold, hunger, and injury were only part of the threat. Illness was a fourth killer with no name attached to it and no way to fight back. There were no antibiotics for infection. A cut on your hand from butchering a carcass could turn septic and kill you within days. Childbirth carried enormous risk for both mother and infant. In an era with no safe intervention, if anything went wrong. Skeletal evidence from sites across Europe, including the large collection of Neanderthal remains from Krapina in modern-day Croatia, first excavated in the early 1900s, shows individuals who died young and others who carry the marks of a genuinely hard life etched directly into their bones. Some of the Krapina bones also carry cut marks that a subset of researchers have argued may point to cannibalism, possibly during periods of extreme scarcity, though other specialists think the marks are better explained by ordinary burial or scavenging processing. That debate has never fully settled, and any honest account of Krapina has to leave it open rather than picking the more dramatic answer just because it makes a better story. Demographically, the picture that emerges from decades of skeletal analysis is a grim one by modern standards. Estimates drawn from age-at-death patterns across multiple Neanderthal sites suggest a large share of individuals never made it past their 20s or 30s, and reaching anything close to 50, the age Shanidar one may have reached, appears to have been rare enough to be almost remarkable. This was not a world with a retirement plan. It was a world where surviving long enough to become an elder was itself a kind of achievement, one built on the group protecting its most vulnerable members through injury, illness, and hard winters, exactly as it protected Shanidar 1. So, let's reconstruct a single day. You wake up before light because the fire needs tending, and if it goes fully out in this cold, that alone could kill someone in your group. Someone always sleeps closest to the coals for exactly this reason. You eat whatever was saved from yesterday's kill because there is no pantry and no reliable tomorrow, and food that isn't eaten today may not survive to be eaten at all. You spend hours on foot, tracking animals across frozen or muddy terrain, watching wind direction so your scent does not give you away, reading broken twigs and half-frozen tracks the way you might read a text message today. When the group finally finds game, everyone with a spear moves in together, because a lone hunter against a bison is a lone hunter about to die. Here's what I find remarkable about this part. Coordinated group hunting like this requires real communication, real trust, and almost certainly some shared plan worked out before anyone raised a spear. That is not the behavior of a mindless animal reacting on instinct. That is strategy, under mortal pressure, with people whose lives depend on getting it right together. If the hunt succeeds, there is a narrow, precious window of safety, meat, warmth, and rest. Children in the group eat. Someone tends to whoever got clipped by a hoof or a horn during the chase. If it fails, or if someone is badly hurt, the whole group's calculation for the week just got worse, and there is no backup plan waiting in a cupboard. There is no using your phone to order dinner. There is no visit to a doctor. There is only the fire, the group, and whatever the next few days of weather and luck decide to do to you. Night falls fast in an ice age winter. The group gathers close around the fire, because body heat and firelight are, quite literally, the only medicine and the only heating system available. Tomorrow, whether anyone is ready for it or not, the whole search begins again. Here is the counterintuitive twist, the one that actually reframes everything you just heard. For all of that daily violence and risk, Neanderthals were not a failed, primitive experiment that simply could not cope. They survived, successfully, across a genuinely brutal ice age climate for roughly 400,000 years. Compare that to our own species, Homo sapiens, which has existed for only around 300,000 years total, and has spent a comparatively small fraction of that time facing conditions anywhere near as harsh as a European glacial winter. Researcher Rebecca Ragg-Sykes, whose 2020 book Kindred synthesized decades of Neanderthal research for a general audience, has argued forcefully against the old caveman stereotype, pointing to evidence of controlled fire use, complex tool traditions, care for the injured, and possibly even symbolic behavior. Whatever ended the Neanderthals around 40,000 years ago, and researchers, including Chris Stringer and Clive Finlayson, still debate exactly how much of it was climate shift, competition with incoming Homo sapiens, or sheer small population bad luck. It clearly was not simple stupidity or an inability to survive hardship. If anything, the fossil record shows the opposite. Bodies absorbing catastrophic injury after catastrophic injury, and somehow, again and again, healing. Which brings this back to you, sitting somewhere warm right now, reading this on a screen that did not exist for 99.9% of human history. You will very likely never have to spear an animal that could kill you just to eat tonight. You will probably never need your entire social group to keep you alive after a career-ending injury, because you have insurance, hora hospital, or, at minimum, a locked door and a thermostat. That is not a small thing. It is worth sitting with for a second. The distance between your Tuesday and a Neanderthal's Tuesday is not really about intelligence or toughness or grit. It is almost entirely about infrastructure and a few 100,000 years of humans slowly building softer landings for each other. Your fingers are warm right now. The fire never really goes out anymore. And for roughly 400,000 years, that was the whole difference between living and not.